Hey, everybody, this is Texas State Representative Trey Martinez Fischer. Welcome to Politics, your one-stop shop for all things politics, all things Texas. It has been a crazy couple of weeks, and I apologize that our podcast has moved around a couple of days. It's just been that busy. This is the last week of our legislative session, so we've got late hours, early mornings. We're working on Sundays, and frankly, if I get some time away, I'm actually catching up with my wife and my children and my business. But we've got a great show, so I'm glad you tuned in. We're going to be visiting with State Representative Ron Reynolds. Ron is a very good friend of mine. He is the vice chairman of the Texas Legislature Black Caucus. He's from Fort Bend County, and he's got a lot to say today. As we tape this show, this is the 1-year anniversary of George Floyd's death, and we're going to listen to Ron about his disappointment and his frustration going through a legislative session and not seeing what he was hoping for, what we were all hoping for in terms of bringing real reform with the George Floyd Act. So you're going to hear from him. And if we have time, we're also going to be joined by State Representative Eddie Rodriguez from Austin, Texas, from Travis County. Eddie's been around a long time. We are actually have about the same level of seniority, and we'll fight about that later on the show. But we're going to get his perspective, kind of looking back, as today is the last day for the House to pass Senate bills, and it's the last day for the Senate to pass House bills. And so when the clock stops at midnight, we're going to look back to see what were some of the disappointments we have this session. So this is going to be a great show. Thank you for listening. Always make sure you're following me on social media. And that's going to be at TMFTX, and that is at TMFTX on both Facebook and on Twitter. And don't forget to DM me, send me your suggestions for the show. We're going to be transitioning out. We're going to end the session on Monday, so we may have maybe another show or two that's going to focus on the Capitol. Then we're going to transition back to San Antonio. And, part of this pod is also to talk about, not just what's going on in politics here at the Capitol. Maybe we'll start talking about some local politics. We definitely want to get in a little bit of the arts and culture. We've got some cool things happening in the city of San Antonio. And so we hope to keep the show going, but we're going to be transitioning a little bit. So just bear with us. So if you have any ideas, or if you want to come on the show, or if you know somebody that we should be talking to, just let us know, and we'll see if we can accommodate you. So thank you for always supporting politics, and we're going to have a great show. Hey, everybody, welcome back. Joined by my good friend, special guest. This is State Representative Ron Reynolds, and Ron's a powerhouse. I'm going to say a few things about him in his bio. This is his 6th term in the Texas House. He sits on a couple of committees that are pretty important. He's on the Environmental Regulation Committee, and he's also on the Committee on Energy Resources. And so, a couple of areas that are very important in the state of Texas. He also happens to be the vice chair of the Texas Legislature Black Caucus, which is very important around here. And he comes from Fort Bend County, which is right outside Houston. And the really cool thing about his district, he is the first African-American to represent Fort Bend County since Reconstruction. So that was a long time ago. So Vice Chairman Reynolds, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's an honor, Trey, to be on your show. I'm a big fan, and I'm looking forward to participating today. Well, look, I hope you warn them. I'm always going to speak truth to power. I'm going to keep it real, bro.
Hey, man, you do. And that's what I appreciate about you so much. And for our viewers and listeners, we're in the middle of a break. Today is the last day to pass Senate bills. We'll be working to the clock strikes midnight. We were lucky enough to get a 30-minute break to grab some lunch. And instead of eating lunch, I asked Rep. Reynolds if he would join me on this pod to talk about what we're doing. But because we've got a few minutes, I want to really just laser in on something. Unfortunately, right, because this stemmed from tragedy and bad news, but you've been very vocal. You've been very out front, very outspoken on the loss of George Floyd, who we all know came from Houston's 3rd Ward. Today is his 1-year anniversary. And so, sort of reflecting on what that means for the world, because it certainly caught the attention of the world. What does today mean? And then could you just sort of put it in context that today is the last day that the Senate is going to pass House bills and the House is going to pass Senate bills? And have we done enough legislatively to honor the memory of George Floyd and to show respect to his family and to show that we want to bring justice where these injustices are occurring across the state?
Well, Trey, that's an excellent question, and I'm really happy that you posed that question for me today, as we reflect on the 1 year anniversary of the brutal death, the senseless slaying of George Perry Floyd by former officer Derek Chauvin in Minneapolis. As you mentioned, George was a Third Ward resident of Houston, Texas, who attended Jack Hayes High School in the heart of Houston, who really, what we saw with him was a microcosm and really represented and reflected what happens to so many Black and brown people, men of color, that die senselessly at the hands of police. And this just happened to be caught on national TV because of a bystander that had the courage to film it from her cell phone, and it went viral. And thank God it did, because the narrative for the officers always, they fear for their life. But we know that when that officer had his knee on George Floyd's neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds, that George Floyd was subdued with his hands behind his back cuffed, and other officers around him, where he breathed out his last breath and literally said, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe." As a result of it, it led to a watershed moment in this country where there was a social consciousness, a renewal of the Black Lives Matter movement, and people of all faiths and races coming together, marching and protesting during that summer of the pandemic, risking lives to peacefully protest for justice, to fight against systemic racism and inequality that's been perpetuated within our criminal justice systems for decades. And so the question that you posed to me is that, where are we 1 year from the death as we reflect on this last day to get bills passed? We've made some minimal progress to get a few bills passed, but Trey, we have done very little to address this systemic racism. We've done nothing to address ended qualified immunity so officers can be held accountable for violations of constitutional rights. We've done very little to nothing to deal with, many of people who are racially profiled on minor traffic violations. We've done very little and nothing to deal with a great bill that Ms. T had that would have allowed us to not have one bad cop who resigns or is fired from one police department to go to another police department and continue to create carnage among communities. We did nothing. So we're still beholden to the police unions. We're still beholden to the far right. They have, instead of focused on really good public policy, we've been dealing with, as you know, senseless things like permitless carry, voter suppression 2.0 to really limit Black and browns from voting, a fundamental right that we experienced during the Jim Crow era. So yeah, Trey, I'm a little disappointed today as I wear all black and showing solidarity in memory of George Floyd. I made a pledge to George Floyd's family. I went to his funeral and I looked them in the eye and said, "We are committed. We believe that we're going to make progress." This was almost a year ago, and here we are today, with very little that has been done. And so I think what we need to make a message that elections matter. I appreciate President Biden for saying that he wanted the Congress to get a bill to his desk on this anniversary, and they didn't. The Senate did, but the United States, the Congress, the House of Representatives passed a bill, the George Floyd police bill, but the Senate, U.S. Senate has not. And I'm very disappointed that in Texas, since George Floyd hails from Texas, we could have been the leader in this country as a state, and we failed to do so. So I'm very disappointed with the leadership from Governor Abbott, from Lieutenant Governor Patrick, all the way down to the speaker. All leadership has failed because we have misplaced priorities, in the George Floyd bill that originally was filed, House Bill 88, the omnibus bill, never even got out of committee. And so I'm going to continue to speak truth to power and advocate for meaningful criminal justice reforms so that we can get something passed to stop all of these senseless Black and brown people being killed for nothing other than being Black.
Right. Well, that's well said. And I know probably about 4 hours or so ago at 1:30 Eastern time, President Biden and Vice President Harris actually had the Floyd family at the White House. And so, the solace that I have is, although the president set a deadline of today to have federal legislation, the U.S. Congress will continue to work.
That's right.
So we can be hopeful at the federal level they're going to do something. And as long as they keep this top of mind and keep it a priority for us, you and I both know that our work ends on Monday, and we could literally go 18 months without coming back to work, which means House Bill 88, George Floyd Act. If we're going to do it, we can't see it to 2023, and it's got to be frustrating.
It's very frustrating because we continue to see more and more Black men, brown men, more and more Breonna Taylors and Tatiana Jeffersons and Botham Jeans. And we just recently saw what happened to Ronald Green. We see it over and over again, another hashtag. It's almost like we've become numb to it, just like you see these mass shootings and there's no common sense gun reform legislations, no legislations to close the gun show loopholes, to red flag laws. And here we are passing permitless carry, putting more guns on the street. So we're not doing things to address these issues, systemic racism, gun violence, pandemic. We have failed leadership in this state. And Trey, I appreciate you for being willing to join some of us and being bold and audacious and pushing back on not going along to get along. These are real issues, real meat and potato issues. We lead the nation in the number of uninsured, yet we couldn't do Medicaid expansion. Even in the pandemic, when we saw a record number of Black and brown people die because of COVID, most of them didn't have access to health care. We've seen so many issues concerning maternal mortality where Black women lead the nation in Texas in maternal deaths because we don't have access to care. We still don't have equal pay for equal work. We haven't addressed with issues like climate change. I could go on and on, livable wage, so many issues, Trey, and here we are dealing with more restrictions on a woman's right to choose. And so we've had so many misplaced priorities this session. It is frustrating. It has failed leadership, and I can't be silent about it.
No, that's a good point. And if you could, break it down for our audience, a refusal to engage in a meaningful conversation on George Floyd, but yet at the same time, we must have debated, 3 bills by my count, maybe 4, that said for any city or county or jurisdiction that cuts funding to police, we're gonna put you in the penalty box. And what's really interesting to me is amendment after amendment came forward where folks said, all stripes, Democrats, big cities, small cities, African-American, Hispanic, Anglo, they said, okay, I'll tell you what, we would like to change this proposal. We want to amend it to allow local governments to not be penalized when they increase funding. But these Republicans carrying these bills said, no, we're not going to let you do that. We're going to penalize you if you cut funding, but we're also going to stop you if you want to increase funding. Are Republicans sincere about protecting communities?
Trey, they're not. I wish I had when I was a freshman and I was naive, and this is, as you said, my 6th term, and you've been here longer than I have. I had optimism that I've heard so many things. Well, Texas isn't like Congress. They work together in a bipartisan manner. I've seen us become more like Congress, where it's about red meat Republican priorities, conservative Tea Party. So this whole notion about defund the police, they really using it, which really is a false narrative. What was designed to mean we need to reimagine, we need to reallocate resources so that police aren't dealing with mental health issues. We aren't militarizing police. Police are doing other things to help the community. So we're not talking about ending police departments. So this argument that they have is a false narrative that started with the Trump, just like the big lie that he's perpetuated about voter fraud that led to SB 7 and HB 6 that we're dealing with now under the voter suppression. The same big lie about defund the police led to this. They would not accept reasonable common sense amendments. So this, what it really boils down to is taking away local control from the big counties that are led by Democrat mayors and Democrat county judges. That's what it is. Those same Democrats in Harris County, where I come from, in Fort Bend County, in Bexar County, where you come from, in Travis County, in Dallas County, in Tarrant County, that's where they want to implement these changes, but not in other areas. There's 254 counties in this state. So what's good for the big counties, we should also, if it's so good, let's not limit it to just the big counties. Let's bring it over to your communities. But they didn't want to do that. So they are simply trying to punish big counties that are led by Democrats. And I'm just going to call it for what it is. There's a bunch of hypocrisy. They say one thing, they talk about a local control and the overreach of the federal government when Obama or Biden does things to rein in air regulations and monitoring. But then when it comes to the Trump administration, they say nothing. Then when it comes to our judges and our mayors making great decisions to expand voting hours or having voting centers, then they want to take away local control. So I'm really sick and tired of their hypocrisy. And I think the voters need to pay attention, and we need to elect people that believe in good government, not being beholden to one political party that doesn't care about communities of color, only care about the well-off and the well-to-do, and not considering the least, the last, and the lost, the middle class, working families, and certainly not the poor.
No, I appreciate that. I'm with you 100% on that. Now, listen, we've identified the problem, and we know this is not policy, this is politics.
It's politics.
And we know, that this is rhetoric, and folks just trying to check boxes that they took on the conservative agenda. What do we tell our audience? How can we change this? What if you were quarterbacking for one day as we prepare to go back home? What is the one thing folks across the state can be doing so that we can fight back?
Here's the first thing. We need a massive voter registration drive. There's no excuse for anybody that's 18 and over not to be registered to vote. That's a citizen. No, I don't care. Don't give me any excuse about one vote or your vote doesn't matter. Every vote counts. If it didn't matter so much, they wouldn't be fighting so hard to take it away. Second of all, we need to participate in local elections, not just worrying about every 4 years for a presidential, but these local city council, these school board races, these races for state representatives and state senators. Local elections is where they have the most direct impact among your day-to-day lives. And we need to vote our values. We need to hold people accountable for these bad votes. We need to vote in primaries. Even if there's a Democrat that is not voting their constituents, they're not voting their districts, we need to also look at them. So I'm talking about everybody, but mostly it's the Republicans. But I want to Trey, there's some Democrats that go along to get along. We need to people that's fighting for the people and putting people over politics and special interests. There's so many people that are sell out to special interest groups that they lose sight of what they're here for, and that is to serve our constituents. So Trey, what I would tell people is that they need to be registered, they need to vote in primaries, they need to vote in general elections, they need to vote in runoffs, they need to vote in special elections, they need to vote in every single election. And so that's what we need to do. And then we need to make sure once we start doing that and taking some of these incumbents out, and then we can take over and we can effectuate change and bring meaningful reforms to our state. That was my light. And bring meaningful reforms to our state so that we don't have another 1 year anniversary where we're talking about what didn't happen in George Floyd, where we don't continue to talk about failed missed opportunities for Medicaid expansion and minimum wage increase and equal pay for equal work and addressing climate change and so many other issues that our communities care about. So I'm with you, Trey. I'm going to continue to fight with you. And I urge everybody to be engaged, and let's not continue to be to kick the can down the road. We are the change that we want to see. We're the ones who we've been waiting for. And every one of us has a responsibility to be engaged and be involved.
Thank you for listening. If you have a suggestion for the show or an idea for a potential episode, I value your feedback. Email your suggestions to contact@TreyMartinezFischer.com. As always, thank you for listening to Politics. Hey, everybody, welcome back. I'm joined by a good friend of mine. This is State Representative Eddie Rodriguez from Travis County, City of Austin. He is somebody I've known a long time. We always argue about has more seniority, and we can talk about that in a little bit. But for the purposes of this show, I'm senior to Eddie, and so Eddie, I'm going to welcome you to the pod. But I want to ask you the question that's just on the minds of everybody on that House floor is, what did you do to get such an awesome desk mate on the floor of the House?
Yeah. I just got the short straw. That's what happened. And so I've been trying to get a new desk mate all session long, but they won't let me do it because I already drew the short straw. So,
well, we sit together. Apparently, we dress the same. Looks like it, and I haven't told my wife yet. When we get done, I'm going to start working on my beard.
Yeah, okay, then I'll shave mine then.
Look, we've been through this a long time. This is my 10th term, and you've done it 10 times as well, and then you staffed for a few others as well. This is the part of the session where we're going to work till midnight. And why don't you just tell our audience, what's supposed to be happening today?
Well, today's the last day to pass Senate bills on the House, and so it's a big deal. We'll be here till midnight. We're running into the last few days of the session. For all intents and purposes, Thursday is going to be the last day to really do anything. So we all know by now which bills of ours are going to make it through, which bills are already dead for the most part, and what other bills that we may be watching, whether they're bad bills or good bills, what their chances are at this point in the session.
When I came in the legislature in 2001, for a brief period of time, I always thought that the Texas Legislature was like the appellate court or the city council for the city of Houston. And there's always, taking care of city of Houston business in the Capitol. Here lately, it seems like the Texas Capitol has become the city council for the city of Austin. Why don't you tell our audience about, just kind of how it feels to be a member from Austin, knowing that, attack after attack and let's maybe tell our listeners, what sort of bills came across the pipeline that really just singled out your city.
Yeah, thanks, Trey, for that. It's been this session more, I think, than any other session where we call it Austin bashing, if you represent a district here in Austin. We've seen it more and more this session. But to be clear, though, the preemption type of legislation has been going on all session long, especially last session too. So even last night, we had a bill that died on a point of order that really went after Austin Energy as an example. That they would have to go through these processes to get, if there's going to be a rate hike, that they'd have to go to the PUC with just 10 residents, even just petitioning the PUC. So it's things like that. They're very specific to Austin, in this case, Austin Energy. And in fact, it's a bill that was really been promoted by a particular one company in the city. That's another example. We have a statewide camping ban now that's probably going to go to the governor's desk. That was probably in large part instigated by a local ordinance here that allowed for camping in public places. Since then, in fact, the voters in Austin voted to repeal that and to go back to banning camping in public places. But that didn't stop the bill from going through. You can say the same thing about the quote unquote defunding of police. Austin did basically just didn't fund a cadet class for 1 year to try to see how they wanted to teach to have future officers be trained in other ways, right? That would be more that could help better suit, like if they're going to deal with people with homelessness or people with mental disabilities, and just kind of better training and all that. And that was something that we saw here as well. And that's not even to mention, Trey, we had probably 4 de-annexation bills that are members coming from other parts of the state. They came in here to de-annex parts of Austin, to de-annex them out of the city of Austin. And there was one more that comes to mind. And there was another bill that was specific to all of the city of Austin on sound ordinances, because some people were complaining about some of the bars and music venues around town. And so it's those kind of things that we've been having to deal with this session.
And I remember years ago, look, cities get picked on. There was a time when, we had a state senator from East Texas file legislation that only touched the city of San Antonio and the city of Austin's tree ordinance. Right. And back during those days when that happened, it didn't take much to get those folks to back off and respect that this is not your backyard. We don't want foreigners to come to tell the city of San Antonio what to do. Now it almost seems like it's kind of becoming sport or it's some sort of, badge of honor to bash on Austin. I mean, how does it make the delegation feel?
It's tough. It takes away from the stuff that I want to work on that's more statewide in scope. And the same thing is true for all the delegation from Travis County. But we find ourselves, having to defend these attacks on our local, policies here. And it's not to say, Trey, that I agree with everything the city of Austin does and their policies, but I respect the fact that the voters elected these people and they're making decisions. And if the voters don't like it, they can vote them out. But that's not really what's been happening. So it really does. It takes up, if you'd ask anybody from the delegation, if they're on this today, they would on with you today, they would say the same thing. It takes away our time to do other things that really will impact the lives of people all around the state of Texas. And that's
I see it. I mean, we sit next to each other, so I see it all the time. I know it's frustrating, but I mean, look, our job is to represent our constituents, and those constituents are city council members, their mayors, their county judges, and so, for our audience, I mean, that doesn't get to see us. I mean, this is a sort of behind the scenes show. I can just attest sitting next to you, how much time you spend on your phone, how much time you spend talking to the mayor, members of the city council. And like you said, I mean, our preferences, I mean, we have 254 counties, we're knocking on the door of 30 million people across the state. The ideas that we do on this House floor are supposed to impact all 30 million folks. But here, you are having to seem to defend Austin on a regular basis.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, but at the end of the day, Trey, I represent, at the end of the day, I really do represent 176 plus thousand people in my district. And everything I do is under the lens of what will benefit them, what helps them the most. And most of the time that goes with what the city of Austin wants, and sometimes it doesn't. But at the end of the day, all this preemption stuff, you and I've been here, 10 sessions. It used to be where Republicans were all about local control. It's completely flipped around. Now it's the state trying to control what local governments want to do. And let's be clear, these are about democratic cities for them. Right. That's really
well, that's the deal. I mean, the Republicans are about local control unless your local government has 1 million citizens or more. And so, these policies, they end up putting a bracket on them. So it touches Austin, San Antonio, Dallas, Houston. And, here's a spoiler alert. All of those cities are led by progressive councils, Democratic mayors, or independent mayors who lean Democratic. And so I'm almost feeling like this has nothing to do with policy. They're never going to beat these local officials. So if they can't beat them at the ballot box, they're just going to beat them into submission with these bad policies.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, we just dealt with it today, Trey, on the defund police. Now it was for the cities. Now there was a bill today that dealt with counties, right? So now it's even our sheriff's departments and constables and all that. So you can't defund them, or there's all these different consequences, bad consequences if they do. And I think that I've never served them at a local level. I don't think you have either, Trey. But these people, whether you're a council member or the mayor, you see the budget. You know what needs to happen. I don't know what the city's budget is. You don't know what the Bear County budget is, or the city of San Antonio. They have to make those decisions based on that, that information. And we don't have that here, but yet, we're making these kind of laws.
Yeah, and here's the crazy irony, right? You have, the state, or we have Republicans just not being shy about picking on these big cities. And, and there's no respect for the lines of government. But a week ago, there was a resolution on the floor that was really a rebuke to the federal government. And when that Republican member was laying out his resolution, he says, this is a resolution we're going to send to Congress telling them, hey, federal government, stay in your lane. Mm-hmm. And so I just like, man, what planet are you on, man? We've spent 100 days with a state picking on cities, and now you're offended because the federal government's taking some actions. And bear in mind, there was not a single thank you for the billions of dollars and pandemic funding, relief funding that the U.S. government has sent to the state of Texas. Not a zilch about thank you for the several million vaccines you sent to my state for free. Right. I don't get it, man.
I don't get it. Well, and then the first batch of federal dollars came from the Trump administration, right? And then we're getting some more help from Biden. And in fact, we're going to go into special session to spend some of that money, right? So it's very hypocritical.
So look, in the couple minutes we have left, I mean, it's very clear to our audience is that we have sucked a lot of oxygen out this session, creating solutions to go look for a problem. And instead, we should have spent that time doing other things. What are, one or two proposals that you really would have liked to have seen, get debated and passed on this House floor and working towards a compromise that we're not going to get that opportunity to do so?
Yeah, Medicaid expansion is probably number one. We need to talk about that. We just went through the pandemic and we saw the needs of so many Texans, the healthcare needs, and this is our opportunity to do that. We had an opportunity to at least have that discussion, and we weren't really able to do that this session at all. I thought there was a window of opportunity there on that, and I think meaningful criminal justice reform as well. I think the House did an okay job passing some legislation that went to the Senate, but it looks like most of that's not going to make it back. So those are the two bigger things that stand out in my mind.
Well, we're gonna talk to Representative Ron Reynolds in a little bit and reflect on the day we are taping here on Tuesday is the 1-year anniversary of George Floyd's death. I see you wearing the button on your lapel, and we're going to talk to Representative Reynolds to sort of get his take. And my sense is from our pre-taping talk, it sounds like he shares a lot of frustration that to not even have the bill that had George Floyd's name on it even get a hearing to get out of committee. I mean, it was heard but didn't come out of committee. So listen, we've been together 140 days or going on 140 days, and pretty soon I'll go back to San Antonio. You'll stay here in Austin. What kind of message do you have to not just the folks in Austin but folks across the state about what can we do to be part of the solutions to create change in this state, and where does it begin?
Well, I mean, I think elections have consequences, and if you care about some of these issues that you and I have discussed and discussed with other members, I should say, we have to double our efforts in getting more Democrats elected, and it's that simple. I mean, we were able to hold on to our 12 member kind of deficit. Maybe it could have gone the other way, which is good that we were able to maintain that. But I think we have opportunities. People want to hear about Medicaid expansion, and I think people really want to see meaningful criminal justice reform. And the only way to really do that is to change the dynamics here in the House.
Yeah, no, I can't agree more. I appreciate you taking the time. I know it's the last day to pass bills, and we need to be back down on the floor pretty soon. But thank you so much for joining the pod, and really appreciate it. And thank you for everything you do in Austin. Thank you for taking care of your desk mate. I hear he's an awesome guy. I'd like to meet him one day, but enjoy your interim. Take a break. You deserve a little bit of a break. Hey, everybody, I want to thank my special guest, State Representative Ron Reynolds, my desk mate, State Representative Eddie Rodriguez, or E-Rod, as we call him in the Texas House. Thank you for listening to Politics. We will be back next week with one more episode. Follow us on social media, TMFTX, on both Facebook and on Twitter. Have a wonderful week.